Welcome to our channel. Are you ready to embark on thrilling adventures across the cosmos, encounter mysterious alien civilizations, and explore the unknown depths of space? If so, you've come to the right place. Subscribe and join our community of fellow sci-fi enthusiasts who love diving into epic tales and futuristic explorations. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an exciting new story. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment below sharing your favorite sci-fi moment, or let us know what kind of adventures you'd like to see next. Your feedback helps us create the stories you crave. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to journey beyond the stars as we begin our latest saga.
The vast expanse of the galactic hall shimmered under the glow of crystalline chandeliers, casting cascading light onto the faces of dignitaries from every corner of the galaxy. All eyes were fixed on one man, Orion Vance, the renowned commander of the Human Alliance, standing resolute in the epicenter of history. His black uniform, trimmed with silver, hugged his powerful frame, a perfect blend of military precision and diplomatic elegance. Though his expression remained calm, his storm-gray eyes betrayed a flicker of tension and deep contemplation. Orion moved with measured purpose, as if the gravity of an entire galaxy rested upon his shoulders. This was no ordinary mission. He wasn't here to negotiate terms or sign treaties. He was here to marry a woman he had never seen. Viora Lysten, the veiled princess of the Solarian Dominion, awaited him at the heart of the hall, shrouded in mystery and significance. Her presence was as much a symbol of hope as it was a lightning rod for controversy. As the hum of hushed conversations filled the air, Orion's gaze shifted to the opposing delegation. The Solarian representatives stood in shimmering robes that caught and refracted light like liquid diamonds, their faces composed yet unreadable. At the center of their formation stood Viora, her figure obscured by a flowing veil known as the Starlight Shroud, a relic of their ancient customs. The fabric seemed alive, rippling like liquid starlight, concealing her face in a way that only amplified the tension in the room. Whispers swirled around him, conspiratorial and uncertain. No one has ever seen her face. What if she's hiding something? Is this alliance worth such a risk? Even Orion's most trusted advisor, Admiral Grant Morrison, had murmured his concerns before the ceremony. You can still walk away, Orion. No one would blame you. Half the galaxy thinks she's hiding something monstrous under that veil. But Orion had only offered a wry smile in response. Let humanity look like cowards. Not a chance. Now, standing at the threshold of destiny, his heart pounded against his ribcage. The ceremony was about to begin. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. For a fleeting moment, Orion allowed himself a thought: what if the whispers are true? What if the veil hides not beauty, but horror? He quickly dismissed the doubt. Whatever lay behind the shroud mattered less than the mission he had been entrusted with. Humanity had always been defined by its courage to face the unknown. And today, Orion Vance would prove that courage once more. The ceremonial drums began to sound, their deep, resonant beats echoing through the hall. As he stepped forward to meet his unseen bride, the whispers fell silent, replaced by a stillness so profound it felt as if time itself had paused. The moment of unveiling was near, and the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Would this union be the dawn of a new era or the spark that ignited a galactic firestorm? Orion didn't know. But as he approached Viora Lysten, the weight of countless stars upon him, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: there was no turning back. The room held its breath as Viora Lysten raised her hands to the shimmering veil. The Starlight Shroud, a flowing fabric of liquid luminescence, parted like a curtain of stars, revealing a face that defied comprehension. Her silver-toned skin glowed softly, radiating a luminescent warmth, while her violet eyes, flecked with traces of gold, seemed to pierce through layers of thought and intent. Her cascading white hair fell in waves that shimmered like starlight itself. She was breathtakingly beautiful, not in a way that conformed to human standards, but in a manner that seemed otherworldly, almost transcendent. The hall was silent, save for a collective, unconscious exhale from the gathered crowd. Orion Vance, for all his preparation, found himself momentarily stunned. He had braced for the worst: monstrosity, deformity, or some terrifying truth that might justify the whispers of fear and suspicion. Instead, he stood before someone whose beauty was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Yet, it was not her appearance that struck him the most. It was her presence, commanding, intelligent, and undeniably resolute. "Were you expecting something monstrous, Commander?" Viora's voice was melodic, carrying a tone of bemused challenge that snapped Orion out of his daze. "Actually," Orion replied, a roguish grin forming, "I was betting on scales. I owe Admiral Morrison 20 credits." Laughter rippled through the hall, breaking the tension. Even Viora's lips curved into a faint smile, her glowing eyes sparkling with amusement. But beneath the light-hearted exchange, Orion could sense something else: a subtle unease, a guardedness in her posture that spoke of secrets she carried alone. The ceremony proceeded with precision, every step meticulously choreographed to blend human and Solarian traditions. As Orion recited his vows, his deep, steady voice carried across the chamber, resonating with conviction. Yet, as he slipped the ceremonial ring onto Viora's finger, he couldn't ignore the tremor in her hands. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a crack in the perfect composure she had maintained. When the formalities ended, the newlyweds were ushered into a private reception room, away from the watchful eyes of their respective delegations. The room was a masterpiece of interstellar aesthetics, blending the sleek, angular designs of human craftsmanship with the fluid, organic beauty of Solarian architecture. "You're surprisingly calm," Viora observed, her tone measured as she sipped a glass of Solarian nectar, its shimmering blue liquid catching the light. "Most would have been unnerved by the unveiling. Humans are drawn to light," Orion replied with a small shrug, watching her closely. "We've been reaching for the stars since we first looked up at the night sky. You're no different, a star standing before me." Viora's lips twitched at the compliment, but her violet eyes held a shadow of something deeper. She glanced around the room, ensuring they were alone, before speaking in a lower voice. "There's more to this marriage than appearances, Commander. You should know that." Orion's brows furrowed, his instinctive wariness flaring. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a sudden, sharp noise shattered the moment, a glass breaking somewhere in the adjoining hall. The two turned in unison, their bodies tensing. Orion's years of combat training took over as he scanned the area for threats, while Viora's glowing eyes narrowed, her posture rigid. When the door opened, it wasn't an attacker but a Solarian aide. Pale and frantic. "Counselor Thane Alaric, he's collapsed." The mention of Thane Alaric immediately set Orion's mind racing. The counselor had been an outspoken opponent of the marriage, decrying it as a desecration of Solarian purity. Orion had noted the man's rigid posture and cold demeanor during the ceremony, as well as his white-knuckled grip on his ceremonial staff. Something about Alaric had felt off, but Orion had chalked it up to political theater. Now, As they hurried to the scene, Viora's expression darkened. If he's involved in any disruption, it could jeopardize everything. You think this is more than an accident? Orion asked as they strode down the polished corridor. His steps quick and deliberate. I think nothing with Alaric is ever accidental. Viora replied. Her voice sharp. He's dangerous. Orion. You need to trust me on this. Arriving at the scene, they found Alaric being helped to his feet by Solarian guards. His staff lay on the floor nearby. And for a split second, Orion's sharp eyes caught a glint of something metallic beneath Alaric's robes. It wasn't standard diplomatic attire. Their eyes met. And Alaric's lips curled into a faint, venomous smile. Ah! The happy couple, he sneered. His tone dripping with sarcasm. How touching. Orion stepped forward. His presence imposing. What's your game? Alaric? The counselor's smile didn't waver. Oh. Commander Vance. I assure you. I have no game. I merely stand as a guardian of tradition. But traditions have a way of protecting themselves, often violently. If necessary. As the tension crackled in the air, Orion's instincts screamed that this was only the beginning of something far more sinister. Viora Lysten may have been the veiled one at the ceremony. But it was clear that Thane Alaric harbored shadows far darker than anything a shroud could conceal. The tension in the air was palpable as Orion and Viora returned to their private quarters aboard the Celestial Voyager. The flagship diplomatic vessel now serving as the backdrop for their uneasy alliance. Despite the opulent blend of human and Solarian aesthetics, crystalline windows filtering starlight onto soft, earth-toned furnishings, the room felt heavy with unspoken concerns. Viora moved to the viewport. Her silvery hair catching the ethereal glow of distant nebulae. Orion watched her closely. His soldier's instincts honing in on the subtle stiffness in her posture. She was deep in thought. Her bioluminescence flickering faintly, a signal of unease that she likely wasn't aware he had learned to read. He's planning something, she finally said. Her melodic voice tinged with certainty. Orion stepped closer. His broad frame casting a faint shadow in the ambient starlight. Thane Alaric, he asked. Already knowing the answer. Viora turned. Her violet eyes narrowing. He's always been a thorn in my side. But this feels different. The way he looked at you. At us. During the ceremony, he's not just resisting change. He's terrified of it. Orion's jaw tightened. Fear makes people dangerous. Do you think he'd risk open sabotage? Viora's expression darkened. Her glowing skin pulsing faintly. I don't think he's acting alone. Alaric has always surrounded himself with loyalists. Those who cling to the old ways. If he's orchestrating something, it's bigger than just him. Orion studied her carefully. Noting the tension in her slender frame. You know him better than I do. What should we expect? Viora hesitated. Her gaze drifting back to the stars. My people revere tradition almost to a fault. They see it as a shield against the unknown. A way to preserve what they believe to be purity. Alaric has used that fear to maintain his influence. But he's also deeply invested in our limitations. What do you mean by limitations? Orion asked. Stepping closer. Her shoulders stiffened. You've seen how we hide behind our veils. It's not just about modesty or ritual, it's a facade. Generations of genetic stagnation have left us weaker. Less adaptable. Alaric knows this. But he clings to the idea that keeping outsiders away is the solution. Your presence, and this union, threatens to expose the truth. Orion crossed his arms. So this isn't just about politics. It's about survival. Viora nodded. For centuries. We've masked our decline with ceremony and tradition. You and I, Orion. We're more than just a diplomatic gamble. We're a challenge to everything he's built his power on. Before Orion could respond, the ship shuddered slightly. A faint vibration rippling through the floor beneath their feet. His instincts kicked in immediately. What was that? Viora turned sharply. Her bioluminescence flaring brighter. We shouldn't be changing course. Orion moved to the ship's console. His fingers deftly navigating the controls. The trajectory's been altered, he muttered. Destination override, locked out from the bridge. Her voice dropped. Edged with alarm. That's impossible. Only high-ranking officials can access those controls. Orion straightened. His eyes meeting hers. Or someone with the right connections. Alaric. Viora's glow flickered. Her hands curling into fists. If he's taken control of this ship, he won't stop until he's sabotaged everything. Then we stop him first. Orion said. His voice steady and resolute. Whatever he's planning. It ends here. With that, the two of them moved toward the door. Their partnership forged in the fires of an uncertain alliance. Ready to face whatever lay ahead. The faint hum of the ship seemed to echo the unspoken promise between them, this was only the beginning. The corridors of the celestial Voyager hummed softly with the sound of the ship's engines. A steady rhythm that now carried an undercurrent of unease. Orion and Viora moved swiftly. Their steps synchronized despite the tension mounting between them. The dim lighting cast flickering shadows on the metallic walls, amplifying the sense of urgency. Where would Alaric go to seize control? Orion asked. His voice low and focused. The auxiliary command station. Viora replied without hesitation. It's the only place he could override the primary navigation system without being detected immediately. But, her words trailed off. Her bioluminescent glow dimming as doubt crept into her expression. But what? Orion pressed. His sharp gaze catching the hesitation in her movements. It's heavily secured, she admitted. Only authorized personnel are granted access. And Alaric would have ensured the guard stationed there are loyal to him. Orion's jaw clenched. Then we'll have to get creative. As they neared the auxiliary command station, Viora's bioluminescence flickered faintly, a Solarian equivalent of nervous energy. Orion had come to recognize the subtle shifts in her light. A language of its own that betrayed her emotions even when her words didn't. You're worried, he said. Glancing at her as they approached the final corridor. Not worried, she corrected. Her voice firm despite the faint tremor in her glow. I'm calculating. Alaric is clever. But he's predictable. He'll have prepared for brute force. Not strategy. Orion smirked. Good. Because brute force isn't my style, most of the time. They stopped at the corner. Peering into the corridor leading to the command station. Two Solarian guards stood at attention outside the sealed doors. Their shimmering uniforms catching the faint starlight filtering through the viewport. They'll never let us pass. Viora murmured. Her tone edged with frustration. Orion studied the scene for a moment. Then turned to her with a small grin. They might let you pass. You're royalty. Remember? Viora raised an eyebrow. And what about you? Humans aren't exactly welcome here. Orion shrugged. His grin widening. I'll improvise. Before she could argue, he stepped back into the shadows. Melting into the dimly lit corridor. Viora hesitated for a moment. Then squared her shoulders and stepped forward. Her luminous presence immediately drawing the guard's attention. Princess Viora, one of them greeted. His tone respectful but guarded. We weren't expecting you here. I wasn't expecting to be rerouted without explanation, she replied coolly. Her voice carrying the weight of authority. Open the doors. I need to speak with the commander immediately. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Our orders were clear. Princess. No one is to enter without authorization from Counselor Alaric. And I am countermanding those orders, she said. Stepping closer. Her bioluminescence flaring subtly, a deliberate display of dominance. Do you intend to defy me? The tension between them was palpable. For a moment. It seemed the guards might stand their ground. But then. In the corner of her vision. Viora caught a flicker of movement, Orion. Slipping silently behind the guards like a shadow. Before either could react. Orion moved with military precision. Incapacitating one guard with a swift strike to the neck while catching the other in a chokehold. The second guard crumpled to the ground moments later. Unconscious but unharmed. I thought you weren't going to use brute force. Viora remarked dryly as he stepped out of the shadows. Sometimes. It's just faster. Orion replied with a shrug. Wiping his hands on his uniform. The auxiliary command station was dimly lit. Its consoles glowing faintly with holographic readouts. At the center of the room stood Counselor Alaric. His back to them as he studied the ship's navigation systems. The faint hum of the controls was the only sound. But the tension in the air was suffocating. Alaric. Viora called out. Her voice sharp and commanding. Step away from the console. The counselor turned slowly. His expression calm but his eyes cold. Ah. Princess Viora. And Commander Vance. What an unexpected pleasure. Cut the pleasantries. Orion said. His voice edged with steel. You're rerouting this ship. Why? Alaric's lips curved into a thin smile. You humans are always so direct. It's almost endearing. He gestured to the console. This ship is headed to Solarian territory where it belongs. Your meddling is over. Your actions could spark a war. Viora said. Stepping closer. Her bioluminescence intensifying. Do you understand what you're risking? A necessary risk. Alaric replied. His tone unyielding. Your union is an affront to everything we stand for. This abomination you've created threatens the purity of our people. Orion's hands tightened into fists. But Viora raised a hand to stop him. You're wrong. Alaric, she said. Her voice steady but filled with conviction. What Orion and I represent isn't a threat. It's survival. Our people are stagnating. And you know it. This union is our chance to adapt. To thrive. Alaric's expression faltered for a fraction of a second. But he quickly masked it with disdain. Survival at the cost of our identity? Never. Identity isn't static. Orion said. Stepping forward. It evolves. It grows stronger when it embraces change. The counselor sneered. And what would a human know of strength? More than you think. Orion shot back. Strength isn't clinging to the past out of fear. It's having the courage to face the future. For a moment. The room was silent. Then. With a sharp motion. Alaric reached for a concealed device on his wrist. Before he could activate it. Orion moved. In one swift motion. He knocked the device from Alaric's hand and pinned the counselor against the console. Your plan's over. Orion said coldly. And if you want any chance of redeeming yourself, you'll cooperate. Alaric glared at him but said nothing. Viora stepped forward. Her glow radiating authority. You will answer for this, Alaric. But for now, you'll undo what you've done. Restore the ship's course. Defeated. Alaric finally nodded, his shoulders slumping, as he worked to reset the navigation. Viora and Orion exchanged a glance. They had won this battle. But the war for unity was far from over. Let's finish this, Orion said quietly, his voice carrying a note of determination. Viora nodded, her bioluminescence steady and bright. Together, the celestial Voyager glided back into its original course, its sleek frame illuminated by the twin suns of Solarian space. Within the Grand Council chamber of the Solarian capital, hundreds of dignitaries gathered once more, their bioluminescent robes glowing faintly in the crystalline light. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of history palpable. Orion Vance stood beside Viora Lysten at the center podium, the human and Solarian delegations watching intently. Viora's glow was more radiant than ever, her natural luminescence heightened not only by her presence but also by the growing life within her. Beside her, Orion stood tall and composed, his storm-gray eyes scanning the room with quiet determination. Together, they were the embodiment of a fragile but resolute alliance. Distinguished members of the council, Viora began, her voice steady and commanding. We are gathered here at a crossroads in our history. For centuries, our traditions have guided us, protecting what we hold dear. But we can no longer ignore the truth, those same traditions have also bound us, preventing us from evolving, from surviving. Her violet eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of each council member. Our people face a choice. We can continue to cling to the past, to fear the unknown, or we can embrace a future of possibility. A future where we do not simply survive, but thrive. Orion stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the silence. Humanity has always been defined by its ability to adapt. We've faced countless challenges, and each time, we've found a way to move forward. This alliance is no different. It's not about losing your identity, it's about finding strength in unity. He gestured to the holographic display behind them, which showed the genetic analysis of their unborn child. This child, he continued, his voice softening, represents the best of both our worlds. A union of adaptability and brilliance, of courage and light. A bridge to a future where both our peoples can flourish. The room erupted into murmurs. Some voices were filled with awe and hope, others with doubt and resistance. One elder rose, her shimmering robe casting prisms of light. What you propose is unprecedented. It challenges everything we've held sacred for generations. It does, Viora acknowledged, her bioluminescence steady and unwavering. But what has holding to those traditions brought us? Decline. Stagnation. This is our chance to not only preserve who we are but to elevate it. The elder hesitated, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with uncertainty. And if we fail? Orion stepped in. Failure isn't an option. Humanity didn't reach the stars by fearing failure. You don't achieve greatness by playing it safe. You take risks. And this risk, I promise you, is worth it. The chamber fell silent once more. Then, one by one, the council members activated their glowing seals, casting beams of light into the air, symbols of their approval. A majority had been reached. The alliance was ratified. Later that evening, in the private gardens of the Solarian Palace, Orion and Viora stood together, watching the twin moons rise above the horizon. The bioluminescent pools shimmered softly, their light mingling with the glow from Viora's skin. Orion's hand rested on her belly. Feeling the faint, rhythmic pulse of their child's bioluminescence. "We did it," Viora said softly. Her voice tinged with both relief and hope. Orion smiled, his gaze fixed on the moons. "We started it. The real work begins now." Viora turned to him, her glowing eyes searching his. "Do you think they'll follow through? That this won't just be a fleeting moment?" "They'll follow through," he said firmly. "Because they've seen what's possible. And because people like Alaric won't be able to stop what's already begun." At the mention of Alaric, Viora's expression darkened briefly. The former counselor was now under house arrest. His once loyal followers fractured and uncertain. Still, his resistance had left scars that would take time to heal. "Change is hard," she murmured. "Even for me." Orion cupped her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "You're stronger than you know. You've already proven that." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "And you, my human, have a way of making me believe it." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their journey settling into a shared sense of triumph and anticipation. Then, a faint ripple of light in the pool caught their attention, an early glimpse of their child's influence. Perhaps. Or simply the universe's way of blessing this fragile but powerful union. Years later, the child born of their union would grow to symbolize the new era of cooperation between humanity and the Solarians. The child's light, both literal and metaphorical, would guide a galaxy once divided by fear toward a future defined by hope. But for now, under the glow of the twin moons, Orion and Viora allowed themselves a rare moment of peace. Together, they had faced the unknown and dared to reach for something greater. And together, they would ensure that the light of this new alliance would never fade.